You were never a real Christian. You never knew Jesus. You don't understand Christianity. Hi, and welcome to the Secular Scriptures. I'm Gail. This is the first in a three-part series about these three statements that I hear from Christians anytime I mention that I'm not. I'm going to hit each of them on three different levels. First, the Christian perspective, as I understand it, and then the social and psychological, and lastly, the personal level. If this is the first video of the Secular Scriptures that you've seen, welcome. I grew up in a broadly Christian fundamentalist evangelical environment. I was never baptized, but I was heavily involved in multiple local church communities, primarily the Wesleyan First Baptist and Jehovah's Witnesses. And as a teenager, I hopped around the Mormon, Methodist, and Lutheran churches, though I'd stopped believing by then. You'll hear me mention a few others like Assembly of God. I was basically hitchhiking to California, except for it was local churches with friends. I rarely knew what I was going to walk into. One even had snakes. That was special. I had stopped believing before I was 10 and left Christianity for good by 17. Why am I talking about this on the internet now? Well, because I'm finally dealing with my religious trauma in a constructive way, which for me means intellectualizing the heck out of it. As you get older, all of that childhood trauma starts to manifest as physical ailments, and medication is expensive. And therapy is awesome, and community support takes you so much further, so welcome to the digital age. An important note, I am not the gatekeeper of Christianity. My philosophical stance on who gets to be a Christian is if they say they are. I do not care about petty dogmatic arguments over the Trinity, transubstantiation, how many squats you do during service, how long your Lord's Prayer is, or any other arbitrary dividing lines that you all decide to draw in the sand. That is not my business. If you say you're a Christian, I'll trust you, bro. I'm going to talk about some adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. Nothing graphic, but still potentially painful. Please use the timestamps in the description box below to navigate if you need to. I am not a medical professional. I have a minor in psychology from over 25 years ago, so that and an advent calendar will help you count down to Christmas. Now, let's get to today's topic. You were never a real Christian. From the Christian perspective, depending on the denomination, Christians may view someone who has left or rejected Christianity as one or more of the following. Never truly saved. This aligns with the denominations that believe in eternal salvation, once saved, always saved, like Baptists, Presbyterians, and Evangelicals. This is in contrast to the Methodists, Anglicans, and Wesleyans who believe that salvation can be lost through sin or lack or loss of faith. You may hear things along the lines of a moral failure, you just want to sin, they were lukewarm, or have fallen away. More generally, there is an acknowledgement that sometimes people will get baptized due to social pressure or get caught up in an emotional moment and it's not a true conversion, sometimes framed as the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. When the heightened emotions wear off or the social support disappears, the false convert's faith also disappears. Being from the wrong tradition. There are two separate conversations here, so this one gets a little bit complicated. In the first, this is a matter of doctrine. Jehovah's Witnesses, some smaller Protestant sects, and certain Catholics, not the majority, believe that salvation is only possible through their particular denomination. I only have direct experience with the JWs here. They don't see anyone outside of their own denomination as being saved. It is my understanding that the shunning practices have eased up a tiny bit, but for those who left or were booted in the 80s and 90s, it was a complete cutting of ties. They would speak of former members in a slightly regretful way that is far too polite for the catastrophic social actions that accompanied it. The second is much more common in Christianity in general, where there is a feeling of you just didn't hear the right words because of the denomination that you were raised in. The idea is that if you only thought about Christianity the way they do, you'd be a believer with no problems at all. And their church, of course, has the correct understanding, and that will fix everything. I feel like this one needs a flow chart or one of those quizzes about what type of Christian should I be to navigate it. On the social and psychological end of you were never a real Christian, this statement usually comes from a place of hurt or fear. Your average Christian who is deeply rooted in their own faith cannot imagine anyone leaving their faith. If someone who was a true Christian can leave, this could happen to them too, and that is terrifying. If someone comes from a tradition that believes that salvation is eternal, the only possibility that they can consider is that this was not a case of true salvation. This is along the same lines of denying that there are contradictions in the Bible, even when pointed out, and they simply refuse to see it, or they have methods like apologetics to justify it. Someone leaving doesn't fit within the framework of their faith, and therefore allowing the idea in would be a painful or catastrophic crack in that framework. This is an example of cognitive dissonance, which is the psychological discomfort experienced when holding two or more conflicting beliefs, values, or attitudes, or when your beliefs contradict your actions. To reduce this tension, people often change their beliefs or behaviors, justify their actions, or ignore or downplay conflicting information. In reality, real Christians become ex-Christian all the time for various reasons. Social, educational, logical, mental health, or changes in the structure of their brain due to injury or time. It's certainly not limited to those either. I think that the response within denominations that believe that salvation can be lost for various reasons can potentially be much healthier. This leaves room for things that just happen in life, like social traumas, injuries, mental health, and brain changes, which I mentioned above. But unfortunately, members of those denominations can also dish out a whole lot of vitriol with statements like, "you just wanted to sin." This is especially painful for the LGBTQ community. Birth, sex, gender, and sexual orientation are not items one orders off of a menu of options. They are things a person is born with. I won't say that we don't have choices in how we handle this suite of characteristics that we are born with, but discrimination against someone because they happen to be gay is, to put it quite bluntly, bonkers. And to be fair, many of these denominations are LGBTQ plus affirming for that reason. If your church is discriminating against you for your gender or sexuality and you want to remain Christian, go find an affirming church. Call or email first and then read the online reviews, because some of them will claim they are and they really aren't. The Methodists and Anglicans just had a schism over this. You have some options. Episcopalians, United Church of Christ, the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, some Presbyterian churches, and the Disciples of Christ are all affirming denominations. And it's also okay to just leave the religion entirely. We need to talk about love bombing and social pressure. Love bombing in a religious setting is a manipulative tactic where new members are overwhelmed with excessive flattery, affection, and attention to make them feel a sense of belonging and dependence. This is often a coordinated effort by a group's leadership to recruit and control new members, creating a deceptive environment that can lead to further spiritual and psychological abuse. And I'm adding financial and social control to that list. This process can also include making extravagant gestures and encouraging an accelerated sense of commitment or a belief that the relationship is predestined. Both the Mormons and the Jehovah's Witnesses have a reputation for using love-bombing tactics to get a person to join and stay in a congregation. This process moves quickly, and if you don't stay on their target timelines, you are shamed or abandoned. Other churches also use these tactics, infamously the International Church of Christ and the Family International or Children of God. Now, just because a church isn't a cult, that doesn't mean that they don't use love-bombing tactics. When Christians speak of false conversions due to emotions and the subsequent deconversions after that, oftentimes these were cases where love bombing was used on the victim, and once that attention goes away, the warm fuzzies do too, leaving the individual feeling abandoned, rejected, and doubting everything that they just experienced. Social pressure is a huge issue for children. Children raised in a religion are often praised and love bombed for officially accepting that religion. A child getting baptized is a special time of love and attention where they are held up as valued community members, made to feel special, and while most adults have the capacity to transition from a role of being supported to support giver, a young child probably doesn't. When attention shifts to other children, they may feel rejected or abandoned. There may be strong family pressure to get baptized and be saved. And in many denominations, the threat of hell is constant. I'll talk about that more in the personal story portion. Parents will often just schedule a baptism or confirmation without ever asking the child if this is what they want to do, or in some cases they know the child doesn't want to and will decree that this is the way it's going to be. Children may go through with it believing that they have no choice. They may or may not even question it. As with other issues of consent, those who are amenable will just happily follow the crowd, but those who are hesitant or opposed may not feel safe in speaking up and saying no, even if they have an authority figure watching out for them. Many children will quietly leave once they have the autonomy to do so. Pressure to be baptized can also come from their peers. Kids like to feel a sense of belonging and will go with the crowd and even lie to be included, and specifically to not be excluded, bullied, or ostracized for being different. Where all of this becomes a very bumpy road is in the neurodiverse community. Oftentimes, we will not lie just for the sake of conformity. We do not pick up on the unspoken social rules or even sometimes the spoken ones. And if we do, we will question why. We may heavily intellectualize things, have communication disabilities, take things incredibly literally, have difficulty with abstract and symbolic thinking, have a strong need to pick it apart and see what makes it tick. We may struggle to memorize or read things, or memorize and read too much, as in my case, encounter overwhelming or traumatizing sensory issues in a church setting like lights, sounds, smells, being touched. Ew, I really hate being touched. We may struggle to separate out thoughts and emotions, have difficulty sitting still, have a strong sense of justice and logic. When these things are at odds with the written text, we struggle. Many children with sensory processing disorder will do just about anything to avoid getting wet. Sometimes this has to do with transitions. The pool or bath is fine once we're in it, but getting in? Horrors! We strongly dislike change, and being transformed with the Holy Spirit sounds like the biggest, scariest change one could possibly go through. On a related note, many neurodiverse children have been forced to change everything about themselves their entire lives. This is sometimes called masking. And the whole Jesus kit just sounds like a deeper layer of that particular hell. What this often means is that rejecting religion is the safest course of action. I want to touch on the psychology of the idea that someone wasn't a real Christian because they were from the wrong denomination. This could be a video by itself, but briefly, this can go one of three ways. The first is the Catholic-Protestant divide. Usually this comes down to a faith versus works issue. In the past, it was sorted out by tying people to a wooden pole and lighting them on fire, or waging continent-destroying wars. It was about structuring power and money, and the egos of kings and popes with entire armies to toss at each other. Today, it's down to bickering and snide comments between neighbors, so I'm not going to complain very much. As I said in the intro, I am not the gatekeeper of Christendom. Second is the exclusivity issues. On a psychological level, this in-group think makes people feel special, like they have the secret to the universe, the answers to life, and all those other folks are just lost in the darkness. One phrase you may hear in Christian fundamentalist sects is, be in the world but not of the world. While this isn't necessarily part of high control groups, it can be a major red flag. If people who leave are vilified, that's a second red flag, and you may want to take another look at group dynamics like financial control, social isolation from family or friends, or if they try to restrict your travel or ability to work. These high control groups are characterized by charismatic leadership, indoctrination and thought reform, isolation, and rigid power structures. The Jehovah's Witnesses and FLDS are examples of high control Christian groups, but any group can become a high control group. Third is what I like to call the minor nitpicking of doctrine and dogma. Many Christians believe that someone who left or rejected Christianity just didn't have quite the right magic words or had a bad religious education, or that some other minor thing didn't click into place and all you need is to hear their version and everything will be instantly set to rights. If it's ignoring the Old Testament, rejecting inerrancy, which I agree with, literal versus symbolic details, or whatever it happens to be, they firmly believe that with the correct understanding, anyone and everyone will become a Christian. This is a twofold issue of psychological certainty and cognitive bias. Psychological certainty is the subjective feeling of being convinced that something is true regardless of objective evidence. It is a state of high confidence or conviction that is held even when a belief is unjustified or false. Cognitive bias and identity protection is when people employ biased reasoning to prove propositions they already find desirable or that align with their worldview. Once a person believes a given thing, their mind is motivated to reinforce that belief rather than modify their pre-existing beliefs, seeing their specific doctrine as truth that others are simply missing. On the personal level of, you were never a real Christian, in my case, you're right. Probably. Unlike many people who have deconstructed or deconverted from Christian fundamentalism, I have never claimed to be Christian. I rejected Christianity despite being raised in it, highly involved in it, interested in it, and believing it. For as much rent-free space as this religion takes up in my brain, I think it's time to unpack that because it's complicated. We'll start by talking about religious incredulity and role models. I was not raised in an overtly religious household. My father is Christian, but he's been mostly deaf his entire adult life, so church was not a practical activity for him. Due to a heavy work schedule, on the rare occasions when he did attend church, he felt like it was a waste of his time. He'd rather be in grease-covered overalls swearing under a tractor than in a monkey suit sneezing at some old lady's perfume. My mother was raised Christian, but is more of a pantheist or spiritual deist who believes that God is love and embraces being a heathen. She had a bad church experience and was never quiet about the hypocrisy, many abuses, or bullshit that she saw in church power structures. While some of my religious leaders were excellent humans, others were power-hungry abusers, and I inherited Mom's no BS line of thinking. If you are familiar with the 2013 paper, The Origins of Disbelief, about why people don't believe in religions, this is a good example of religious incredulity, meaning I did not have credulous, as in good, religious role models. I had people who threatened me with hell a lot, but I never saw the expression of religious faith performed in a way that would lead me to believe that this was a net positive action. I saw religion as a tool for dishing out or dodging punishment, an elaborate game of freeze tag with dubious safe zones managed by various rituals and mysterious code words that could suddenly change the rules. Neurospicy AF, and we're being joined by Mr. Chase Dog with his clicky nails. I have very early memories. I remember listening to people talk and rolling the sound around in my mind, practicing on my own until they were right, and then carefully plotting out the sentences before speaking. I watched the salamanders in the pond go from eggs to tadpoles to glistening black creatures with yellow and orange spots, toddling back to the house to tell Mom. When I was 2, I'd memorized the structure and the names of the people in the U.S. government because Dad thought it was a good party trick for his friends. I didn't know why they laughed so hard. I learned to read when I was 3 and was highly articulate. Amazing. And if you have any training in early childhood development, you know this isn't a brag, and you're frantically pushing the little button that raises the red flag, just like you ought to push the like and subscribe button right now. I don't know how neurotypical children think. What is the world like for people who don't have to study behavior, facial expressions, body language, fluctuations in tone and volume, and then decide from a menu of infinite options how someone is feeling and how one ought to respond to the myriad scenarios that dance through my brain? What is it like to read a book in your native language and to be able to just choose from 4 options what something could mean when meaning is naturally layered, complex, subjective, and experiential? What is it like to come up with an idea and then fill in the information to support it versus learning all that one can in a given time, accruing data, drawing conclusions based on that information, and then pretending that you didn't write the darn report backwards from finish piece to outline to premise because you are supposed to do it that way and risk being wrong? Are the curtains blue because blue represents the main character's deep regret at the choices that have led to their current predicament, or are they just frickin' blue? Now, hand that 7-year-old child a Bible because you are exhausted by her questions. Do you think you're going to get a convert who is satisfied by all the answers she just read? Or did you just create a rather pissed off atheist? Church hopping! Ah, yes, the church hopping. My therapist thinks this is a root cause of my religious trauma, and in part, she is absolutely right. Sometimes I didn't know what I'd be walking into. But to be honest, I think this also allowed me to see some healthy religious practices sprinkled in with the more regular, holy crap, that sounds like a cult, messed upness. I'm really not sure how this impacted my view of Christianity. Maybe the differences in point of view reassured me that no one really knew what they were talking about and they were all just making crap up as they went along. It certainly didn't mitigate my early religious trauma. The First Baptists freaked out that I would go to hell if I died before being baptized, but of course I wasn't a baby, so I had to accept Jesus into my heart. But I had to do the Bible study before that could be a thing, and then cue all of the administrative and red tape hurdles. Miss Mary from the JWs told me not to worry about that there was a thing called the Age of Accountability, where all children who die go straight to heaven. It isn't until 8 that sins are counted on your soul. Now, Google says it's 13, so either they upped it in the time between then and now, or she was being pushy. And the Wesleyans never fussed much about it that I remember. Apparently, they don't set a number on the Age of Accountability. Regardless, I would have been too young, so it would have never come up. The last time I saw the JWs was when my friend Matt was leaving public school and his mom brought him by to ask if I was ready to join the church or say goodbye to my friend forever. She blindsided me with this. I thought I had plenty of time to pick a church, if any. Apparently, like a gallon of milk, my expiration date was up that day and hour. She wanted her answer, and anything less than full and enthusiastic consent from an 11-year-old was grounds for complete ceasing of all communications. I think that may have been the thing that finally pushed me from being angry at God into actual atheism. So when a Christian throws, "You were never a real Christian," at me, I just say, "You're right. I believed in this God. I believed in Jesus. I also fully believed that I was going to hell, and I couldn't justify that concept with a good and loving God. I believed the end times were just a few days or weeks away and that I'd be left behind to starve or struggle and then be tortured by the scorpion horse monsters from Revelation. No matter how often or hard I prayed, I never managed to feel that indwelling of the Holy Spirit or be made anew or any of that crap. And the idea of spending eternity in the presence of a God that would damn people to hell forever just for never having heard of Jesus broke my sense of justice so hard that my faith in this God shattered. Because I had to plunk my butt in those pews, I watched people. I listened to the sermons for the logical fallacies and the lies. I had a lot of years of being told I'd go to hell, this, that, and the other thing, and my stress manifested itself in physical pain. I've been in pain my entire life, literally my whole life. Hell ain't got nothing on my own body. Threatening me with eternal torture is absolutely tiresome now. If you are a Christian parent of a neurospicy child and you are listening to this, please, for their sake, don't do this to your kid. Be proactive in making sure that others are not doing it either. Do not fill their heads with hell and satanic panic, hate and demons, and the frickin' end times rapture BS. Even if you believe it, don't do this to them. It doesn't lead anywhere good, and they will lie to keep you happy, and then they'll leave, but not without a lifetime of pain and years of therapy. Thank you so much for joining me on the Secular Scriptures. If this was informative, please like, share, do the bell thing, and comment with your thoughts and feelings or whatever direction they take you. I'd love to have a discussion, and I want to hear your perspective on this. I'm going to try to get a few videos out over the holidays, but life is busy, so enjoy.